professional fighter mocked the black janitor and ended up humiliated. Jason Miller was warming up on the mat when he saw the perfect opportunity to impress the other athletes at the gym. Henry, the janitor who had been cleaning the place for 5 years, walked by with his bucket and mop near the ring where the fighters trained. That's when Jason got the idea that would change everything. The 28-year-old, known for his regional titles and sharp tongue, caught everyone's attention. "Hey guys, how about a little demo?" Jason shouted, pointing at Henry. "I'll show you all how to do a perfect armbar." The other fighters stopped their training and gathered around, forming a circle. Soft laughter echoed through the room as they realized Jason's intention. Henry paused what he was doing and looked around. At 52, with graying hair and hands calloused from work, he knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to make him the butt of a joke. "Doctor, Jason, I need to finish my work," Henry said, using the respectful tone he always maintained with everyone at the gym. "Come on, Uncle Henry, just a quick little joke. I promise I'll go easy on you," Jason insisted, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Kevin, one of the youngest fighters on the team, started clapping slowly. Soon others joined in, creating silent pressure on Henry. The atmosphere, which had been serious training just moments ago, now felt like a Roman circus. Henry glanced at the gym's door. He knew he needed this job. 2 daughters in college, a wife at home, and bills that never stopped coming. Losing his job wasn't an option. "All right, Dr. Jason. But just for a minute, because Mr. Martin doesn't like messes in the gym," Henry agreed, setting the bucket aside. The Total Force Gym was well known throughout the Queens neighborhood, in the Brooklyn area of New York City, for training great fighters. Its owner, Martin Cooper, had built the gym's reputation over 20 years of hard work. At that moment, he was in a meeting in his office and didn't see what was happening on the main mat. Jason stepped into the ring with the confidence of someone who had never lost a casual match. His defined muscles gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his posture showed years of intensive training. Henry stepped up slowly, in no rush. He removed the blue shirt of his janitor uniform, revealing a physique that surprised some of the onlookers. Despite his age, he had a solid build, the result of years of carrying buckets, moving equipment, and a personal discipline few knew about. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now, back to the story. "Come on, Uncle. I just want to show the boys how to do a proper armbar," Jason said, positioning himself in front of Henry. What was supposed to be a quick demonstration of the athlete's superiority took a completely different turn. Henry accepted the position Jason proposed, but when the younger man tried to apply the hold, something strange happened. In a move that seemed to come out of nowhere, Henry slipped free with a fluidity that left everyone stunned. Not only did he escape, but within seconds, Jason was on the ground, immobilized by a hold even the gym's most experienced fighters couldn't identify. Silence fell over the room. Jason tried to move but realized any motion would cause intense pain in his shoulder. He looked up and saw Henry's calm, almost bored expression. "Can I let go now, Dr. Jason?" Henry asked, as if inquiring about lunchtime. Jason nodded, still not understanding what had just happened. Henry gently released him and extended a hand to help him up. The courteous gesture completely contrasted with the devastating technique he had just demonstrated. "How did you—" "What was that?" stammered Kevin, his eyes wide. Henry didn't answer. He simply put his shirt back on and headed to the cleaning bucket. The other fighters watched him as if they were seeing a ghost. Jason remained seated on the mat for a few seconds, rubbing his shoulder and trying to process what had happened. "That was luck," said Jason, standing up abruptly. "You caught me off guard, that's all." Henry kept mopping the floor without looking back. His focus on his work was unshakable, as if nothing had happened. But Jason couldn't accept that explanation. "Hey, Henry, don't walk away. Let's go again," shouted Jason, his pride wounded. "Dr. Jason, I have to work. Mr. Martin is already back from his meeting." Indeed, Martin had stepped out of the office and was walking toward the main mat. At 65, the former fighter still carried an imposing presence that commanded instant respect from everyone in the gym. His experienced eyes immediately caught the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" asked Martin, his deep voice carrying the authority of someone who had trained hundreds of fighters. "Nothing serious, boss. Just a quick demonstration," replied Jason, trying to sound casual. Martin glanced at Henry, who was still working, then at the other fighters. He knew this environment well. He could tell when something was off. "Jason, you have training in 20 minutes. Kevin, you too. Everyone, get back to what you were doing." The authority in Martin's voice scattered the group, but Jason couldn't focus on anything else. Throughout the following training session, his eyes kept drifting back to Henry, who worked silently in the corners of the gym. When training ended, Jason approached some of the older fighters on the team. Richard, a 45-year-old veteran who had trained there for a decade, was putting away his gloves when Jason walked up. "Richard, have you ever seen Henry do anything strange before?" "Strange how?" asked Richard, wiping sweat from his face. "I don't know. Does he know anything about fighting?" Richard stopped packing his gear and looked directly at Jason. "Look, Jason, Henry's been working here for 5 years. Always respectful, does his job right, never caused trouble. Why do you ask?" Jason hesitated. Admitting what had happened would mean confessing he'd been outmatched by a janitor in front of everyone. His ego couldn't take that humiliation. "Just curious, the way he moves, I guess. Kid, the man carries heavy buckets all day. Of course he's strong," said Richard, going back to packing his things. But Jason knew it wasn't just strength. Henry's movement had been technical, precise, almost professional. The feeling of being completely dominated by someone who wasn't even trying gnawed at him. In the days that followed, Jason began watching Henry more closely. He arrived at the gym earlier and stayed later, always looking for a chance to understand the man who had shaken his confidence. It was during one of these observations that he noticed something interesting. Henry didn't just clean the gym haphazardly. He knew every piece of equipment, every detail of the ring setup, every technical specification of the machines. When no one was looking, he adjusted things others didn't even notice. One Thursday morning, Jason arrived especially early and found Henry alone in the gym, organizing equipment before training began. It was the perfect opportunity for a private conversation. "Good morning, Henry." "Good morning, Dr. Jason. You're early today." "I wanted to get some solo training in." "You don't mind?" "Of course not. The gym is yours." Jason started warming up, but kept his eyes on Henry. The man worked with impressive efficiency, as if he knew every inch of that place by heart. "Henry, can I ask you something?" "Sure, Doc." "Have you always worked in cleaning?" Henry paused for a moment, but didn't look at Jason. "Honest work is honest work, Doc Jason." The evasive answer only fueled Jason's curiosity. He decided to try a more direct approach. "It's just that last week, during that little spar, you caught me off guard. Where did you learn that?" Henry finally turned to face Jason. His eyes held a mix of weariness and something Jason couldn't quite place. "Doc Jason, you're a talented fighter. You've got a bright future ahead. Focus on that. But I want to understand." "Some things are better left in the past," Henry interrupted, going back to work. The conversation was over, but Jason walked away with even more questions. The way Henry spoke, the way he moved, everything suggested there was much more behind that quiet figure. That afternoon, Jason sought out Martin in his office. The gym owner was reviewing competition spreadsheets and training schedules when Jason knocked on the door. "Come in, Jason. What is it?" "Boss, can I ask you something about Henry?" Martin looked up from the spreadsheets and fixed his gaze on Jason. His expression grew more serious. "What kind of question?" "It's just that I don't know, there's something different about him. The way he moves, how well he knows the gym. Jason, Henry is an exemplary employee. Punctual, hard-working, respectful. That's what matters." "But boss..." "Jason," Martin's voice grew firmer, "everyone has their own story. Henry chose his life and we respect that. If he wanted everyone to know about his past, he'd tell them." The way Martin spoke made it clear the conversation was over, but it also confirmed Jason's suspicions. There really was something in Henry's past that justified all this curiosity. Leaving the office, Jason felt more confused than before. The sense that he was missing an important piece of the puzzle nagged at him deeply. He decided he needed to uncover the truth on his own. Over the weekend, Jason spent hours scouring the internet for information about Henry Wilson Smith, the full name he'd managed to catch from the employee file he'd glimpsed on Martin's desk. But his search led nowhere. It wasn't until the following Monday that his luck changed. Jason was chatting with Mrs. Parker, the woman who'd worked at the gym's front desk for over 15 years, when he decided to try a different approach. "Mrs. Parker, you know everyone here, right?" "Of course, dear, 15 years watching people come and go. Do you remember when Henry started working here?" Mrs. Parker stopped organizing the files and looked at Jason curiously. "I sure do. About 5 years ago. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. He's different from the other employees." "Oh, that's true. He stood out from day one. Polite but reserved. And I'll tell you something, young man. They've offered him other jobs here at the gym." "What do you mean?" Martin tried convincing him to teach something. "You've seen how well he knows the equipment. But he always refuses, says he's fine where he is." This information intrigued Jason even more. Why would someone turn down a promotion? Why insist on working as a janitor when he could have a better position? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing. That Wednesday, Jason decided to try a more aggressive approach. He waited for Henry to finish his shift and discreetly followed him when he left the gym. He wanted to see where the man lived, how he lived, any clue that might help unravel the mystery. Henry walked through the neighborhood streets with steady, even steps. He greeted a few people along the way, always polite and friendly. He stopped at a bakery to buy bread, chatting briefly with the baker as if they were old acquaintances. Jason followed him to a modest house on a quiet residential street. It wasn't luxurious, but it was well kept. A small garden in front showed someone had put time and care into the space. When Henry went inside, Jason hid behind a parked car and watched for a few minutes. Through the living room window, he saw Henry hugging a woman and talking to two young women who looked to be in their 20s. The domestic family scene offered no clues about Henry's mysterious past. In fact, it only reinforced the image of an ordinary, hard-working man devoted to his family. Jason went home more confused than ever. The next day during training, Jason was especially irritable. His performance was below par, and Richard noticed the difference. "Dude, what's up? You've been acting weird for a week." "It's nothing," Jason lied, punching the heavy bag harder than necessary. "Is this about that thing with Henry?" Jason stopped punching and looked at Richard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because ever since that day you've been staring at him like he's an alien. There's something off about him, Richard. Don't you see it?" Richard sighed and paused his own workout. "Jason, can I give you some advice? Stop making a mountain out of a molehill. Henry's a hard-working guy who does his job and leaves. If he knew how to fight, you think he'd be mopping floors?" Richard's logic made sense, but Jason couldn't let it go. The feeling of being overpowered by someone who wasn't even trying still gnawed at him. It was that Friday when everything changed. Jason had decided to train late and was nearly alone in the gym when he heard noises coming from the main mat. It was almost 10 at night, long after closing time. Curious, he crept closer and saw something that completely changed his perspective on Henry. The man was alone on the mat, moving with a fluidity and technique Jason had never seen before. This wasn't just exercise, it was a combat dance, a sequence of movements so flawless it looked choreographed. Henry trained alone, executing complex combinations of strikes, locks, and dodges. His breathing was controlled, his movements economical and precise. Every technique was performed with a perfection that would take years to master. Jason watched, mesmerized, for nearly 20 minutes. Henry finished one sequence and began another, maintaining the same level of excellence. It was like watching a master at work, someone who'd spent decades refining those skills. When Henry finally stopped, Jason saw him walk to a small locker at the back of the gym. From it, he took out a towel and a water bottle. Only then did Jason realize this was a routine. Henry wasn't there by chance that night. Deciding he needed answers, Jason stepped out of hiding and approached the mat. "Good evening, Henry." Henry turned quickly, clearly startled. For a moment, his eyes showed something Jason had never seen before: vulnerability. "Dr. Jason, I didn't know anyone was still here. Sorry to bother you. I was finishing my workout and heard some noise. The two men stared at each other in silence for a few seconds. Jason could see Henry was weighing his words, figuring out how to explain the situation. Mr. Martin lets me use the space sometimes, Henry finally said, to work out. Work out? Jason couldn't hide the disbelief in his voice. Henry, what I just saw wasn't exercise, it was art. Henry took a deep breath. He grabbed his towel and started drying the sweat from his face, buying time to think. Dr. Jason, everyone has their quirks. This is mine. Quirks? Jason took a step forward. Henry, I've been training for 15 years. I've seen the best fighters in the country. What you were doing there isn't a quirk. It's high-level technique. Henry finished drying off and began putting his things back in the locker. His movements were deliberately slow, as if he were stalling to decide what to say. Dr. Jason, you're a smart guy. You've already figured out I know a thing or two about fighting, but it doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter? How can it not matter? Henry, you have skills that 90% of the fighters in this gym will never develop. So what? Henry's voice grew slightly firmer. What does that change in my life? I have an honest job, a family to support, bills to pay. Those skills don't cover my daughter's college tuition. The mention of his daughters made Jason remember the family scene he'd witnessed a few days earlier. He began to realize there were aspects of Henry's life he didn't know, responsibilities that might explain his choices. But you could be making so much more money teaching, competing. Henry let out a bitter laugh. Dr. Jason, I'm 52. What promoter would want a fighter my age? Then as a teacher, a coach, any gym in New York would pay well for your skills. Henry shut the locker harder than necessary. When he turned to face Jason, his eyes held an expression the younger man had never seen before. Who said I want that? Who said I want everyone to know what I can do? But why not? Because sometimes it's better to leave the past where it belongs, in the past. The way Henry said it made it clear the conversation was over. He grabbed his things and headed for the exit, leaving Jason alone on the mat with even more questions than before. Over the weekend, Jason couldn't think of anything else. The image of Henry moving with that flawless technique wouldn't leave his mind. He decided he needed to uncover the truth, even if it meant investigating on his own. On Monday, he arrived at the gym determined to find answers. He sought out Martin again, but this time with a different approach. Boss, I need to talk to you about something important. What is it, Jason? Last Friday, I saw Henry training alone here at the gym. Martin's expression changed immediately. He leaned back in his chair and fixed his gaze on Jason. And he wasn't just working out, he was... Martin, that man has technique like I've never seen in my life. Martin was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed and looked out the office window. Jason, what do you want me to say? The truth. Who is Henry really? Henry is exactly who he chose to be. A dedicated employee, a family man, a hard worker. But before that, before working here... Martin stood up and closed the office door. When he sat back down, his expression was more serious than Jason had ever seen. Jason, I'm going to tell you something, but I want you to understand the responsibility that comes with it. Henry specifically asked that no one know about his past. He wants people to see him for who he is today, not who he was. Jason leaned forward, knowing he was finally about to hear the truth. 25 years ago, Henry Wilson Smith was known by another name in the ring. Henry Iron Fists Smith. He was the United States wrestling champion for 3 consecutive years. He won international competitions, represented the United States in world championships. The revelation hit Jason like a punch to the gut. Henry wasn't just someone who knew how to fight. He had been a champion, a legend of the sport. But how? Why did he stop? Life, Jason. Life happened. His wife got sick, needed expensive treatment. He had 2 young daughters. He chose between his career and his family, and he chose his family. He chose his family, sold everything he had, used all his savings to pay for his wife's treatment. By the time she recovered, He'd been out of the ring too long, too old to return to a competitive level. Jason fell silent, processing the information. The image of the man who mopped floors at the gym was being completely reshaped in his mind. Why did he come to work here? Because I offered. We've known each other a long time. When I heard about his situation, I offered him the job. He accepted on the condition that no one knew who he had been. And you agreed. I agreed. Because I respect his decision. Henry doesn't want to be treated as a curiosity, a washed-up former champion working as a janitor. He wants to be respected for the work he does, for the person he is today. The conversation with Martin completely changed Jason's perspective on Henry. Now he understood the perfect technique, the way the man knew every detail of the gym, the way he moved. But he also understood why Henry wanted to keep it a secret. In the days that followed, Jason watched Henry with new eyes. He saw not just a janitor, but a man who had made the greatest sacrifice an athlete can make, giving up glory for his family. The admiration he felt was mixed with deep guilt for how he had treated Henry that first day. That Thursday, Jason made a decision. He waited for Henry to finish his shift and approached him as he left the gym. "Henry, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Dr. Jason. I know who you are." Henry stopped walking and turned slowly to face Jason. His eyes showed a mix of resignation and weariness. "Martin told you." "He did, and I wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For everything. For trying to make a fool of you that day. For trying to investigate you. For not respecting your privacy." Henry studied Jason's face for a few seconds before answering. "Dr. Jason, you didn't know, and I understand the curiosity. I just hope you understand why I prefer things to stay as they are." "I do. But can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you miss it? The ring, the competitions, the adrenaline?" Henry looked up at the sky for a moment before answering. "Every day. But you know what I feel most? Pride. Pride in making the right choice when I had to choose." "Did your wife get better?" "She did, thank God. She's working now, helping with expenses. The girls are in college, one studying law, the other medicine." "And you don't think about coming back, even if not to compete, but as a teacher, a trainer?" Henry started walking again, and Jason kept pace with him. "You know, Dr. Jason, I've gotten used to this life. No pressure, no expectations. I do my job, earn my money, go home to take care of my family. It's a simple life, but it's a good one." "But you train alone. I've seen you in the gym." "I train because I love the sport. I'll always love it. But training for myself is different from training to compete or to teach." They walked in silence for a few minutes. Jason was beginning to understand the peace Henry had found in his simple life, but at the same time, he felt there was something wasteful about so much hidden talent. "Henry, can I make you a proposal?" "What kind of proposal?" "What if you taught me a few things? Not officially, just technical conversations during your work breaks." Henry stopped walking again and looked directly at Jason. "Why do you want that?" "Because I saw you move. I saw the perfection in your technique. And because I realized I can learn more from you than from any instructor I've ever had." Henry was silent for a long moment, clearly considering the proposal. "Dr. Miller, if I accept, it has to be under a few conditions." "Which are?" "First, no one else can know. Second, it can't interfere with my work. Third, if I say it's over, it's over. I accept all of them. And there's one more thing. If you think this will be easy, you're very mistaken. I won't go easy on you just because you're young and strong." Jason smiled for the first time in weeks. I wouldn't expect anything less from Henry Iron Fist Smith. That name died 25 years ago. Now I'm just Henry. But as he said it, Henry also smiled. And Jason realized that for the first time since they'd met, there was a real connection between them. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The first informal training sessions between Jason and Henry happened during breaks, when the gym was emptier. Henry kept a low profile, always making sure no one else was paying attention to what they were doing. The first lesson was about movement. Henry showed Jason how he wasted energy on unnecessary motions, how his stance could be more efficient, how to anticipate an opponent's move through subtle body cues. "Doctor, Miller, you fight like you're trying to break through a wall," Henry said during one of these sessions. "But fighting isn't about brute strength, it's about efficiency." "How so?" "Let me show you. Try to hit me." Jason threw a strong, straight punch toward Henry's face. The older man moved just a few inches to the side, enough to evade the strike. At the same time, he lightly tapped Jason's fist, redirecting its path and making the younger man lose his balance. "See? I didn't block your punch. I didn't need strength for that. I just redirected the energy you put into the movement." Jason was fascinated. It was like learning a completely new language, a way of understanding combat that went far beyond strength and speed. The lessons continued for several weeks. Henry taught concepts about distance, timing, and reading body language. He showed how small adjustments in stance could create huge opportunities, how breathing affected performance, how the mind controlled the body during a fight. "The fight happens first here," Henry said, pointing to his own head during one lesson. "If you don't win in the mind, you won't win with the body." Jason felt he was improving rapidly. His regular training improved significantly, and other fighters at the gym began noticing the difference in his technique. "Man, what happened? Did you hire a private coach?" Kevin asked after an especially good training session from Jason. "Just changed a few things in my approach," Jason replied vaguely. But keeping the secret was becoming harder. The improvement in Jason's technique was too obvious, and some fighters started asking uncomfortable questions. It was during this period that something unexpected happened. A fight promoter, known for discovering new talent, showed up at the gym looking for Martin. Michael Thompson had heard about the fighters training at Total Force Gym and wanted to evaluate some potential recruits. "Martin, I've been told you have some promising young fighters here," Michael said, watching the training session. "I do. That one over there is Jason, one of the best of the new generation." Michael observed Jason training for a few minutes and was impressed by the technical progress the young fighter showed. "Has he improved a lot lately?" "Tremendously. I don't know what happened, but in the last few weeks he's made an impressive leap in skill." "Who's his trainer?" Martin hesitated for a moment. "He trains with the regular team. Richard oversees his group." But Michael, with eyes sharpened by years of experience, noticed something more. During the session, he saw Jason glance discreetly at the janitor working in the corners of the gym. He also noticed the man making subtle, almost imperceptible gestures as if giving silent tips. "Martin, who's that man over there?" Michael asked, pointing at Henry. "That's Henry, our cleaning staff, eh?" "Cleaning staff?" Michael studied Henry for a few moments. "That man moves like a fighter." Martin felt his heart race. The last thing Henry wanted was attention, and now one of the most well-known promoters in the business was watching him. "Michael, he's just a dedicated employee." "Martin, I've been in this business for 20 years. I know a fighter when I see one. That man has stepped into professional rings before." As the two spoke, Henry realized he was being watched. He tried to stay focused on his work, but he knew his cover was about to be blown. Michael approached Henry directly. "Excuse me, friend, can I ask you something?" Henry stopped cleaning and looked at the well-dressed man in front of him. "Of course, sir. Have you ever fought professionally?" Henry quickly glanced at Martin, who was watching the conversation with concern. Then he looked at Jason, who had stopped training and was also paying attention to what was happening. "Sir, I work here as a janitor." "That doesn't answer my question," Michael insisted. "Your movements, the way you watch the training, how you position yourself. Everything points to combat experience." Henry sighed. He knew this moment would come eventually. "I did fight, sir. A long time ago." "How long?" "Over 20 years. "In what style?" "Freestyle. Submission fighting." Michael smiled, knowing his suspicions were correct. "And why did you stop?" "Personal life. Family." "I see. And you're not interested in coming back, even as a trainer?" Henry looked at Martin again, who was now stepping closer to the conversation. "Sir, I'm happy with my life as it is. Listen, let me make you an offer. How about giving some private lessons? I have a few fighters who could benefit from your experience. No, thank you. Not even if I pay well, really well? Henry hesitated for a moment but shook his head. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. Michael insisted for a few more minutes, but Henry stood his ground. Finally, the promoter left his card and walked away, promising to return. After Michael left, the gym buzzed with chatter. The news that the janitor was a former professional fighter spread quickly among the athletes. Some began treating him with a reverence that made him uncomfortable. Henry, why didn't you ever say anything? Kevin asked, approaching him after training. Because it wasn't important. How wasn't it important? Man, having a former pro here is amazing. Henry didn't like the attention. Over the following days, he realized he could no longer work in peace. Fighters stopped to ask questions. Some tried to convince him to give tips. Others simply watched his movements. The situation grew even more complicated when Jason became the target of inquiries. Jason, is it true you were training with Henry? Asked Richard. Why do you ask? Because your technical progress lines up exactly with the discovery that he's a former pro, and I've seen you talking to him multiple times. Jason found himself in a tough spot. He'd promised to keep it a secret, but the evidence was too obvious. Richard, if Henry wanted to keep it quiet, he must have his reasons. But man, imagine how much we could all learn from him. And who says he wants to teach? The conversation made it clear the situation was becoming unsustainable. Henry could no longer maintain his privacy, and Jason felt guilty for being partly responsible. That night, after everyone had left, Henry and Jason met to discuss the situation. Dr. Jason, I think our training sessions need to stop. Because of what happened today? Because of everything. It's getting too hard to keep things discreet. Jason felt frustrated. He'd been learning so much from Henry, improving in ways he'd never thought possible. But Henry, you could be helping so many more people. Your knowledge is too valuable to stay hidden. And who says I want that? Dr. Jason, you don't understand. I didn't stop fighting because I had no choice. I chose to stop. I chose a different life. But why waste so much talent? Henry turned to face Jason directly. It's not waste. It's choice. I had my time in the spotlight, my moment in the ring. Now I want peace, quiet, to take care of my family without pressure. What if you could have both? Family, peace, and the chance to share your knowledge. How? Jason had been thinking about it all afternoon. What if you only taught on weekends or evenings? A few selected students, nothing too public. Henry shook his head. Dr. Jason, you're not understanding. Once you open that door, you can't close it again. The media comes, the curious come, all the pressure comes back. But Henry, no. My decision is final, and please don't bring it up again. The firmness in Henry's voice made it clear the conversation was over. Jason felt frustrated, but respected the decision of the man who had become his informal mentor. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the gym changed completely. Henry tried to work as usual, but the constant attention from other athletes made everything harder. Some treated him with exaggerated respect, others asked uncomfortable questions about his past. The situation worsened when Michael returned to the gym, this time accompanied by a sports journalist who wanted to write a piece on forgotten former champions. Henry refused the interview, but that only fueled media curiosity. Henry Wilson Smith, the Henry Iron Fists who works as a janitor, the journalist wrote in the article that ran days later. A story of lost glory or newfound humility. The publication brought even more unwanted attention. Other outlets began seeking Henry out, wanting to know more about his story. The gym turned into a circus, with reporters showing up unannounced and athletes giving interviews about the champion janitor. Henry reached his limit when a TV crew arrived to film his work routine. In desperation, he went to Martin. Martin, I can't take this anymore. I just want to work in peace. Henry, I understand your frustration, but maybe it's time to accept that your story will spark curiosity. You were a great champion. I don't want to be remembered as a former champion. I want to be respected as Henry, the employee. And you are respected. But you can't control what others think or feel. That night, Henry came home more exhausted than ever. His wife, Barbara, immediately noticed something was wrong. What's wrong, Henry? You look like you've been fighting the world. They found out about my past at the gym. Barbara sighed. She knew this day would come eventually. And now? Now it's chaos. Journalists, businessmen, everyone wants to interview me, hire me, use me as a headline. And you don't want that. I don't want any of it, Barbara. I want our simple life, our peace, our routine. Barbara moved closer to her husband and held his hands. Henry, do you remember why we made that decision 25 years ago? I do. You were sick. The girls were little. And you chose family. You chose love over glory. And I've never regretted that choice. Then why are you suffering so much now? Henry thought for a moment before answering. Because I'm afraid people won't understand. That they'll think I failed, that I'm a loser who couldn't handle success. And you care what people think? I shouldn't, but... Henry, Barbara interrupted. You're the most honorable man I know. Your choices have always been based on love and responsibility. If people can't understand that, that's their problem, not yours. The conversation with Barbara helped Henry clear his thoughts, but it didn't solve the practical issue. The pressure at the gym kept growing, and he felt more and more uncomfortable. Then something happened that changed everything. During a regular Thursday training session, Jason was sparring with a visiting fighter, someone Michael had brought in to evaluate. The visitor, named Derek, was known for his excessive aggression and lack of control during training. Derek was clearly frustrated that he couldn't dominate Jason, who was using the techniques he'd learned from Henry. In a moment of anger, Derek applied an illegal hold that could have seriously injured Jason's arm. Henry, who had been discreetly watching from a distance, didn't hesitate. In seconds, he was on the mat, immobilizing Derek and freeing Jason from the dangerous hold. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Derek shouted, trying to break free from Henry's grip. "Stopping you from hurting someone," Henry replied calmly, keeping Derek restrained. "Let me go. Who do you think you are?" "Someone who knows the difference between training and attempted injury." Martin and Richard rushed to the mat, but Henry had already controlled the situation. Derek was released but was visibly embarrassed at being overpowered by a simple janitor. "This isn't over," Derek muttered as he left the gym. The incident had unexpected consequences. First, because it showed Henry still had the reflexes and instincts of a professional fighter. Second, because his protective attitude toward Jason revealed a connection between them that many hadn't known about. After the incident, Jason sought out Henry to thank him. "Henry, you saved me from a serious injury. Thank you so much." "I did what anyone would do." "No, you did what a teacher would do. You protected your student." Henry looked at Jason with a different expression. "Doctor, Jason, what happened back there had nothing to do with training or teaching. It was just instinct." "But it was a protective instinct. You care about me, Henry, just like I care about you." Henry was silent for a moment. "Dr. Jason, you've changed a lot since we first met." "How so?" "On the first day you wanted to use me for entertainment. Today I see you've become a better person." Jason smiled sadly. "You're the one who taught me that, Henry. He taught me that respect is earned, not demanded." "And what else did you learn?" "That true strength isn't about dominating others, but lifting them up." The conversation between them marked a turning point in their relationship. Henry realized that, whether he wanted it or not, he had become a mentor to Jason Miller, and Jason understood that his role now was to protect Henry's privacy and peace. The next day, Jason made a decision that surprised everyone. During the afternoon training session, when some fighters started making jokes about Henry and asking intrusive questions, Jason confronted them. "Guys, let's cut it out." "Cut what out?" asked Kevin. "This nosiness about Henry. The man just wants to work in peace." "But dude, what's wrong with wanting to know more about him? What's wrong is that you're treating him like some circus act. He's not a zoo animal for you to gawk at." Richard, who was nearby, joined the conversation. "Jason, no one's disrespecting Henry. Yes, you are, watching his every move, making comments, treating him like a curiosity. That's not respect." "And since when did you become Henry's lawyer?" Kevin asked suspiciously. Jason hesitated for a moment but decided to be honest. since I realized he's a man of integrity who deserves our admiration, not our nosiness. Jason, Richard said, you're hiding something. Your technical improvement, how you defend Henry. There's something you're not telling us. Jason looked around and saw all the fighters listening intently. He knew it was time to take a stand. You want the truth? Henry is the best teacher I've ever had. I've learned more from him in a few weeks than in years of training. So it's true you were training together? Kevin exclaimed. It's true, and you know why? Because he saw potential in me and wanted to help. Not for money, not for recognition, but out of generosity. Then why keep it a secret? Because he asked me to. Because he doesn't want to be treated as a teacher, a former champion, or a celebrity. He just wants to be Henry, the respectful employee who works here. The revelation caused murmurs across the gym. Some fighters felt left out. Others were angry at being kept in the dark. But Jason wasn't finished. And you know what? You should be ashamed. Henry doesn't owe anyone explanations about his past or his choices. He works here, does his job with dedication, treats everyone with respect. That's what matters. But Jason, Richard tried to argue, if he has valuable knowledge, that knowledge is his, Jason interrupted. He decides who to share it with, when or if at all. We have no right to demand anything from him. The argument was heating up when Henry stepped onto the mat. He had overheard part of the conversation and decided to step in. Excuse me, may I speak? Everyone turned to him. Henry stood in his work clothes, holding a cleaning rag, but his posture was different, straighter, more confident. First, I want to thank Dr. Jason for defending me, but he doesn't need to fight my battles. Henry walked to the center of the group. I know you're curious about my story, and I understand that. But I'll explain just once why I prefer to leave my past in the past. Everyone fell silent, waiting. 25 years ago, I was Henry Iron Fists Wilson Smith. I was a national champion, won international competitions, my name was on posters and magazines. It was a life of glory, but also constant pressure. Henry paused before continuing. When my wife got sick, I had to choose between continuing my career and taking care of my family. I chose my family. I sold everything, used all my savings for her treatment. And you never regretted it? Asked Kevin with genuine curiosity. Never, not for a second, because I learned that true victory doesn't happen in the ring. It happens when you look in the mirror and like the person you see. But why don't you want to teach? Why turn down opportunities? Insisted Richard. Because I've found peace in a simple life. Honest work, a close family, responsibilities fulfilled. I don't need anything more. Henry looked at each of the fighters present. You want to learn? Then learn this. Humility isn't weakness. Choosing family isn't failure. And dignity isn't measured by your social status. The silence that followed was profound. Several fighters seemed to be reflecting on Henry's words. But Henry, said Jason, your knowledge could help so many people. Dr. Jason, knowledge isn't just technique, it's also wisdom. And wisdom is taught more by example than by words. What kind of example? The example of a man who doesn't need admiration to have worth, who doesn't need fame to be important, who doesn't need to win to be victorious. Henry's words had a deep impact on everyone present. For the first time, many of them began to understand there were different ways to measure success in life. Richard was the first to speak up. Henry, I want to apologize for how I treated your privacy, for the pressure we made you feel. No need to apologize, Richard. You're young, ambitious. It's natural you see the world differently. But we can learn to see differently, said Kevin. You could teach us that. Henry smiled for the first time in weeks. Teaching that doesn't need specific training. It needs observation and reflection. How so? Look at the people around you. Ask yourselves, what makes someone truly valuable? Is it fame, money, titles? Or is it how they treat others? How they fulfill their responsibilities? How they face hardships? The conversation continued for a few more minutes, and gradually the atmosphere in the gym began to change. The fighters started seeing Henry not as a curiosity, but as an example of character and integrity. In the days that followed, everyone's behavior visibly shifted. There were no more intrusive questions about Henry's past, no more curious looks or whispered comments. Instead, there was genuine respect for the man who had chosen dignity over glory. Michael showed up at the gym again, still trying to convince Henry to return to the fighting world. But this time he was met with a united front of fighters who stood by Henry's decision. "Mr. Michael," said Jason, "Henry has made it clear he has no interest in coming back. Please respect his choice." "But it's a waste of talent," insisted Michael. "With all due respect," Richard interrupted, "you're measuring talent by the wrong standard. Henry's talent isn't just in fighting, it's in how he lives his life." Michael was surprised by the response, but realized he couldn't change the situation. He left the gym, respecting the collective decision to protect Henry's privacy. The media gradually lost interest in the story when they realized they wouldn't get direct access to Henry and that the gym's fighters weren't willing to cooperate with sensationalist articles. Henry returned to his normal work routine, but now in a completely different environment. He was respected not as a former champion, but as a man of integrity who had made tough choices for noble reasons. Jason continued to progress in his training, applying not only the techniques he had learned from Henry, but also the values of humility and respect. His reputation at the gym shifted from arrogant fighter to respectful leader. One evening after everyone had left, Henry and Jason met on the mat for a final conversation about everything that had happened. "Dr. Jason, I want to thank you for how you stood up for me. Henry, it was the least I could do. You changed my life." "How so?" "You taught me that true strength comes from within, that respect is earned through character, not domination. That humility is a virtue, not a weakness." Henry nodded, satisfied. "And what will you do with these lessons?" "I'll try to be a better person, a better fighter, a better human being." "That's the only victory that truly matters, Dr. Jason." They sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened in the past few weeks. "Henry, can I ask you one last question?" "Of course." "Don't you ever miss the glory of the ring?" Henry thought carefully before answering. "You know, Dr. Jason, I found there are different kinds of glory. The glory of the ring is temporary, it depends on wins and losses. But the glory of watching your kids graduate college, seeing your wife healthy and happy, knowing you made the right choices, that glory is permanent. And is there no way to have both? For some people, maybe. But for me, one choice ruled out the other. And I chose the one that gave me more inner peace." Jason nodded, finally fully understanding Henry's perspective. "Henry, will you keep training alone here at night?" "I will. Not because I need to, but because I love it. And there's nothing wrong with keeping a passion alive as long as it doesn't control your life." "What if I wanted to join you sometimes, just to train, no pressure, no competitive goals?" Henry smiled. "It would be an honor, Dr. Jason." They said goodbye that night, knowing they had built a friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. Henry would continue to be the respectful, dedicated janitor, but now he would also be an informal mentor to anyone genuinely interested in learning not just fighting techniques, but life lessons. Jason became an advocate for the values Henry represented, using his position at the gym to promote respect, humility, and dignity among the other fighters. The Total Force Gym became more than just a training facility. It became a place where character mattered as much as skill, where respect was valued above domination, where true success was measured by personal integrity. Henry had achieved something few former athletes ever do. He had found a second life that fulfilled him completely, without bitterness for what he had left behind. His greatest victory hadn't happened in the ring, but in building a life of purpose and meaning. And Jason learned that the true champion isn't necessarily the one who wins the most fights, but the one who inspires others to be better versions of themselves. The initial humiliation he had suffered became the greatest lesson of his life. That real strength comes from recognizing the value in others, regardless of their social standing. Their story became an example at the gym of how genuine relationships can transform lives, how mutual respect can overcome prejudice, and how true wisdom sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. Years later, when Jason became a successful professional fighter, he would always credit his growth not just to technical training, but especially to the life lessons he received from a humble man who chose dignity over glory, family over fame, and character over recognition. Henry continued working at the gym until his retirement, always respected, always upright, always serving as an example that true worth isn't measured by titles or positions, but by how we treat others and the choices we make when no one is watching. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this tale of transformation and perseverance. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between personal dreams and family responsibilities? What decision would you have made in Henry's place? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Jason truly changed, or was it just self-interest? We'd love to read your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.